Welcome back to this debate in the 1st Congressional District. As most Americans know, in January, taxes on every American are set to go up if the so-called Bush tax cuts are allowed to expire. Mr. Walz, where do you stand on that?
First of all, I'm frustrated we haven't done it beforehand. This going to the cliff again is unfair to the American public. I certainly do not want to, and have voted numerous times, to not allow them to be expired, especially on those in the middle class. I think the top 2% need to expire. It'll make sense. What the problem is, if you're going to get this deficit under control and get back in balance, when you cut from 24 to 19%, we're also at 15.4% on revenue. That starts to raise that up. You have a balanced approach. So I said let them expire on the top 2%, keep the other ones in place.
So he says the wealthiest Americans should pay more. Where do you stand, Mr. Quist?
Well, first of all, correction. It's about 17% on revenue, not 15.4%, so I always like to have the facts straight. But also like to mention Obamacare very quickly. You never make anything more efficient by having the government take it over. But the Bush tax cuts have to be kept in place, and that's for middle class, but it's for the whole economy. If we raise taxes, we harm the economy. And it has to be a twofold approach of reducing spending, but then taking the shackles off of free enterprise so that they can expand. And that means things like balancing the budget, rolling back regulations. The last thing we want to do is raise taxes, because then we're putting more dead weight on the free enterprise system. We're going to lose jobs, and it's not going to work.
Mr. Walz, when Mitt Romney named Paul Ryan as his running mate, he really also created a third running mate, which is the Ryan budget, which includes major changes to the Medicare system. Did that make him a pretty easy target, and has that become a major issue in all these congressional races?
In House races, it's very unpopular amongst American public to go to a voucher program. Seniors know they can't go out and shop for insurance. I did town halls with the CEO or with the major players from Blue Cross Blue Shield, and they said, no, you can't buy it. And ending Medicare as we know it and going to a voucher program is very unpopular. Instead of approaching it, I think, again, in a balanced approach to make it sustainable.
And it would not change the program for people 55 and older right now, but where do you stand on the so-called Ryan budget, especially as it pertains to Medicare?
Well, I'm not a fan of Paul Ryan on the Medicare issue, and I agree with him on some things, and I disagree with him on some things. But for Medicare, Social Security, and veterans benefits, the big issue is, are we going to get spending under control? Are we going to balance the budget? If we don't do that, down the road, we will not have enough money for Social Security, Medicare, or veterans benefits. And so having sound financial management at the federal level is key, and that's where I'm coming from. I bring that to the table, and I'm really very good at that.
Let's touch on one social issue. Mr. Walz, you've come out against the amendment to the Constitution here in Minnesota that would ban gay marriage in Minnesota. Why do you plan to vote no? And taking that a little bit further, would you also vote in favor of repealing the Federal Defense of Marriage Act?
Yes, I would. And my point on this is, as having served 24 years and seeing the honor that our young men and women serve with, it's a constitutional issue for me, and a libertarian point for me is that discriminating on a subset of the population simply because of who they are and who they love is simply wrong. And it's especially hurtful for me to see these folks. We can send them to war, and in the case of Andrew Wilford, he died in Afghanistan. He wouldn't have been able to come home and marry who he wanted. He's fighting for those freedoms for all of us, so yes, I would, and I don't think it's a necessary place to enshrine it in the Constitution or in national law.
All right, so you're both against the amendment here and also would vote to repeal the Federal Defense of Marriage Act. Mr. Quist?
Well, I'm a defender of traditional marriage, of course, but that's really a state issue at this point, and I'm much more tuned in to the federal issue. And I'm really concerned about the discrimination against married people in Obamacare, because middle-class married people are going to pay the bills under Obamacare, and they're going to have three choices. They can stay married and be discriminated against, they can divorce and live together unmarried, or they can drop their health insurance. This is not tolerable.
But in terms of the Federal Defense of Marriage Act, would you, do you think a Congress controlled by Democrats and a President Obama would repeal that, and would you be against that?
Well, don't ask me what they would do. I can't predict the future, but I support traditional marriage, and I will do that at the national level if I have the opportunity, and I hope I do.
All right, well, I want to thank you both for taking part in this debate. We've promised you each about 30 seconds to give a closing statement on why voters in the 1st District should cast their vote for you. And Mr. Quist, we will begin with you.
Okay, thank you. The reason that I'm here instead of on my combine, which is pretty tough for a farmer this time of the year, is that I know the federal government is headed in the wrong direction. And that's true at a number of different points, but it's especially true with the deficit. We absolutely cannot keep spending money that we don't have. I mean, we can't do it. Come on. So we have to deal with the irresponsibility of Congress. We have to send people there that are willing to be responsible, good managers who are committed to balancing the budget. That's what I bring to the table. That's why I ask for your support.
And Mr. Walz, why should voters in the 1st District send you back to Washington?
Well, first of all, the honor of serving my fellow citizens in southern Minnesota is the greatest of my life. I think I take their values of collaboration, of vision, of making sure we're working together for a common goal, and doing it in a respectful manner where we take each other's opinions and we discuss them and leading on that. And I'm grateful for that. I think we have something that we can teach the rest of the country in southern Minnesota. We have a growing economy, a great healthcare industry, and good folks. So I hope I can gain your support.
All right, and I wish you both the best of luck on the campaign trail. I'm sure I'll be seeing you over the next coming weeks. Mr. Walz, Mr. Quist, thank you for being here. Minnesota's Lieutenant Governor takes a giant leap for the military. We'll show you that coming up next.
Home announces the opening of World